Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Okay. Hello, folks. Hello, listeners. I'm delighted to have Charlie Lawson here from Investec. A big heavy hitter in the whole finance world. Charlie is someone that I met probably 4 to 5 years ago, something like that. And just what a charming guy. We tend to want to invite charming people, but Charlie just carries a level of integrity that just really struck a chord with me. And he's the loaded guy that everybody talks about, but carries a level of humility that is just so rare. And I'm saying this because I know he would just never, and he's probably wincing here as I'm saying it. So he's kindly agreed to come on here. We're going to hand over to him in a moment to describe exactly what his role is in that company and a bit about his history. Charlie is actually writing a book right now, and he advises people with large sums of money. So people put a huge amount of trust into what he can do. So I thought he would be just excellent to get on the show, to unpick him a bit, to unpick life a little bit, and hopefully come out with some really helpful, exciting, financially invigorating stuff. So hey, Charlie.
Ben, thank you. What a build-up. Oh my goodness. I hope I live up to that. But thank you very much indeed for having me on, and delighted to be here.
Yeah, great, buddy. So can you just give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour, Charlie? Give us a bit about your past. Tell us about the present and perhaps where you're heading, just to start us off here.
So just before we start, yeah. So I'm as you say, I'm writing a book. It's a book on faith, and I think for me that contextualizes where I want money to play in my life, how important I want it to be, and I'd like to think it keeps me grounded. But elsewhere in my life, I'm primarily I'm the father of 6 children, and a husband to a wonderful woman, and those are my priorities. And money helps me provide to a source, but there's so much more, of course, to providing for our families. But that's really, really important to me. My faith can help me in that. And then but from the money side, it started early on, and my dad was a role model there. And perhaps I can share with you 1 or 2 things on that.
Please, yes, please do.
So it's I was encouraged early on to do jobs around the house, and we, for the most part, this is something that we just had to do. And but when we went over and above beyond, whether it be little jobs in the garden, etc., I would get a little extra pocket money, and that sort of all helped, and it went into a little jar, and it's sort of a little bit of accumulated over time. But I guess from an early age I was more of a saver than a spender, and I think that was partly because I saw the role model my father was, which was he was a successful man in the city. He was a stockbroker, and but he used to drive a really old, beaten up Mazda, like you wouldn't believe. I'm one of well, I've got two other brothers. All of us passed our driving test in this Mazda. When it was my turn, I'm the middle brother. It did have a hole in the bottom of the car. And that only got bigger when my younger brother came up. How it would ever pass its MOT back then, I don't think they clearly weren't so rigorous. But the point is that he wasn't flashy. He could afford the nicest car in a car park, but actually he drove around a beaten up old Mazda. I think I've learned something from that.
So can you share with us this kind of sums of money that you're dealing with on a daily basis, Charlie? What are people entrusting you with, to just put us in the frame?
So I will look after investment portfolios beginning at 300,000 and up, really. It's our core range is 500,000 to around 5 million. That's our sort of target market. And I appreciate that's not everybody's cup of tea. But Investec themselves will offer a sort of a fund-based service down to, in fact, up to down to 9,000.
I'm so glad you mentioned those figures, because so many listeners are going right now, this guy is managing sums of money that are completely out of my paradigm, and this is completely useless to me. And yet, wouldn't it be wise to model, understand at least, even if you don't want to model, the approach to life, the approach to money, of people like yourselves and people that have created that kind of fund? What are they doing that's different to the kind of guys that haven't got that kind of fund to invest right now, right? Which you're going to share with us shortly, Charlie. You've got 6 children and you adore your wife. I've met your adorable wife. She's even more adorable than Charlie, way more adorable than Charlie.
No question about that.
How are you feeding 6 children, some big strapping boys in there, and yourself and Michelle? How is this why you need to work at Investec?
Well, yeah, indeed. I think, but partly because early on we made some sacrifices and we built up a little nest egg. And I'd like to elaborate on that in terms of the timing, the benefits that one can have in not actually spending straight away. And but I think we might be coming on to that later on. But I think for me, it's recognizing that investing and enjoying basically the benefits of waiting. I mean, that's ultimately what investment is. It's the reward for waiting, allowing the magic of compounding over the years, the compound interest, the interest on the interest, or the growth on the growth, can really make a profound difference to investment returns over time. So that is, I think, a really important strategy in recognizing, don't kill the golden goose, but actually try and build up the goose and then enjoy the eggs, would be my, the way to start, I think.
And so we've got a whole, not everybody included in this, but we've got a whole load of people right now that are busting a gut to do their best, pay the bills. They're grateful if they've got some savings left at the end of the month, but they're going, the amount of savings I've got here, if I was to invest that money, the returns on that money are so low, I may as well use it to fund the repairs on the car. I may as well use it for just life purposes. So they're just doing their best to turn the handle. How can we help? When you described it, I almost heard it as the difference between adolescence and maturity. Adolescence saying, I want the thing now. Maturity saying, what about the long term? What choices can I make here that are going to pay off for me in 15, 20, even 30 years? How did you make that transition, Charlie?
So I think for me, it was part of my grounding. I mean, I think from a very, very early age, we were taught on Christmas Day that, that we were to open presents, for example, throughout the course of the day. There was a measure of delayed gratification. And I'd like to think I instill that in my own children. The idea of sort of rushing down the stairs and thinking Santa's left you absolutely everything at the age of 2 or 3 is so exciting. But actually, I'd argue more rewarding in terms of life lessons is to certainly enjoy a little bit from Santa, no question, but save a little bit back. It's teaching just little principles like that, whether it be on birthday, Christmas, whatever it may be, but it's teaching the benefits of delayed gratification. Something to look forward to is a wonderful thing. And I think that is, it's in its very infancy, that is the benefits of what we can do by making investments and not snatching the returns straight away, allowing them to grow over time, that benefit of delayed gratification.
It's in terms of life experiences and exciting moments, certainly experiences that Kerry and I have waited for. It's almost like you kind of you have to earn the experience in terms of your patience, and patience is the price that you pay to forego or delay the gratification of the experience you're going to have, and it multiplies it. I'm not sure of the multiple, but to just be patient and wait, that is incredibly rare in a culture where we are heavily marketed to use debt. That debt's a part of everyday life. Everybody else around you's in debt. So if you haven't got the money, you go into debt to get it. Can you just share a bit with us about that approach to life, Charlie, and that cultural issue that we're facing?
Certainly. So I think it starts with really trying to remove yourself from the competing. Don't compete with a neighbor. Don't compete with your friends. It's remove yourself from any sort of notion of trying to be flashy or abovemanship. It's being content with yourself, being satisfied with what you have. And I'm living in a world where everybody wants more. Everybody wants more all the time. But the truth is, in and of ourselves, can we be content with what we have? And I think that notion starts with, if we get that right, then we're not drawn into credit card debt and exorbitant car loans and all sorts of nasties that can just make us slaves to debt, which can be crippling and consuming and can ruin relationships and ruin ourselves. So I think it's important to start right in terms of starting with a sort of an area of content, and let that manifest itself into behaviors such as saving or and in other things too.
Your father's example was, I'm actually doing well with money. I'm a city man. I'm pulling in a decent income. Yeah, I'm gonna drive that Mazda. Was it a Mazda?
It was a
I'm
little
gonna
beaten
drive.
up old blue Mazda.
I'm going to drive that Mazda until it literally dies. So the truth is, in terms of seeing Charlie away from his home, I haven't seen this lavish, the kind of life that I've been sold that a person who's doing well should be living, this keeping up with everyone else kind of thing. You buy you buy fundamentally smart and not fundamentally for how something looks. And that one life lesson that you've chosen to share with us is that the size of the hole in the chassis gets bigger depending on who's having their driving test. Yet your father could have, I believe, based on what you've shared with me here, could have easily invested in a top of the range vehicle because his sons deserve to drive a top of the range vehicle to pass their test. He could have easily made that choice, but didn't. And look at the power of that lesson for you and your brothers.
Absolutely. No, I think that's absolutely right. It's I think it's humbling, to recognize, we don't, just because we can afford it doesn't necessarily mean that we get it or deserve it. And I think also it can teach us a lesson on not only on basically the opportunity costs. If I can, so let me explain that. So for Dad, having his beaten up old Mazda for 10 years, it completely ran to the ground, got zero for it when it went to the knacker's yard. But what he was able to do with, is save with monies that might have been put towards flashy cars, and to put a figure on it, a flashy car costing, say, £100,000 in 10 years' time, worth nothing. If you forego that flashy car and wait, or settle yourself for a beaten up old Mazda, in 10 years' time, that 100,000 that you've subsequently invested, because you've not put it into a car, you've now invested it, if you've generated a mediocre return of, say, 7%, over 10 years, that doubles. That's the power of the compounding. Then you're left with a £200,000 investment, and you can actually recycle that. And then you could, if you wanted to, go and buy a flashy car forever, because that money would then, on the basis of investment returns, you've got a nest egg that you can just rely on. You've not killed the golden goose. And I think that's really, really an important lesson, to wait. And absolutely, Dad did that in spades. And it also recognizes, just because one has it doesn't mean you need to flaunt it, show off to the neighbors or anything. Be content with what you've got. And we were, that Mazda got us around.
And so the common parlance is not something I buy into anymore. I have done. I think and now even, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with setting goals, and sort of aspiring for more. Do you have goals, Charlie? Do you commit to goals? You mentioned Michelle and you, one of your first goals together was to develop that nest egg. Just tell us a bit about that, how to focus on something, give us something tangible that we can hold on to. For most people, the idea of saving and investing could sound boring. So how do you bring that to life? It sounds to me you've already got a natural affinity with it all. So how do we set some goals here? How do we bring this to life?
It starts with a habit. You really try and create a little bit by bit habit forming, whereby, for example, you might commit to £50 a month or £100 a month, whatever it may be, into a typically not a cash-based investments, because really, cash in this day and age of desperately low interest rates really isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's going in reverse. Inflation typically is above the cash returns. So you are better off in thinking, just understanding, and to perhaps the smallest degree, but building a knowledge of some form of funds, or some stock market orientated investments, and making a commitment, just a small commitment, make a commitment that on a monthly basis, the standing order comes out of your account, if provided, of course, you've sorted out your debts, and you are in a position then to bit by bit move forward, and make that a habit. Make that recognize. Don't treat yourself to the extra takeaway. Stick that money into investments, so that then in years to come, you can. If you can't buy the restaurant, you could certainly have a nice holiday with it, or retire early, or whatever it may be. But the point is that it can work for you over time. Let the gravity of time work for you, and that's really exactly what long-term investing can
do. The opposite, of course, is the gravity of debt working against you. Your investment, the gravity of time working for you in investing, the gravity of time working against you for debt. If I throw the word debt at you, Charlie, what's your opinion, your take on
it? It scares
debt?
me. I mean, interest is people that understand interest receive it. People that don't understand it pay it. Debt it can be a scary thing. And for me, I have a mortgage, but it's manageable, and I feel in control. And I've not bought such an elaborate house that I feel I can't. I'm a slave to the mortgage. I've always told my children that you never want your rental income, or they're renting homes for two of my eldest children. Never pay more than a third than your overall net monthly income on a home, on a mortgage, or whether it be or rental income. So lower one's expectations so that you're not slaves to a huge debt burden. It can be crippling in more ways, not just financially, but in the mind, and how it can manifest itself out in other sort of on behavior. It's a terrible thing, and it really, for my mind, it's educating in my case, the children. Say, just because someone will lend you X amount on some credit card, ridiculous, really, just because they can, be mature enough and be recognizing the long-term benefits of not taking it, so that actually when you can afford it, you're not a slave to these crippling rates of interest that can take place.
Charlie, let's spend a bit of time on fear and mistakes. I feel there's a bit of a relationship between them, and so many of us not having good examples of how to manage life when things go wrong in a positive way, because life can deal all sorts of things to different people. So have you had experiences where you've lost your own or other people's money catering for people that might not be in a great financial situation because things have just gone against them? People are losing their jobs left, right, and center right now. Stock market, I spoke to you right at the beginning of the crash. Stock market went nuts. Have you made mistakes with money, and have you lost other people's money? How did you recover? What were the learnings?
Great question. So certainly, yes, on a short-term basis, I've lost my own money, I've lost client money, but we aren't in the short-term game, not me personally from own funds or for client monies. So while we will invariably lose money if the stock market is down 30%. For example, on a bad year or what it may be, that clients will lose money. But if, on the other hand, as we do, educate our clients to commit to staying with us principally for the period of 5 years, they're not locked in. Of course, they can draw the money, but it's recognizing that the stock market, for example, will go up, it will go down. Don't panic when it goes down. Don't be too greedy in wanting more when it goes up. And it's recognizing the fear and greed is a really important part of the education, because and on the fear side, which is where your question is, it's recognizing that we're in the long-term game. No clients have lost money where they've taken a 5-year view and been with us for what we'd consider to be a reasonable length of time. When people do lose money, is they come in at the top of the market. They've loved the extra 20% that we've done, back to back for the previous couple of years, and they go, "I'd like some of that, please." And typically, for example, year 3, the first year they arrive, that we haven't done that, the stock market's fallen 30%, and they started panicking, and they've withdrawn funds. And that's just having short-term expectations. It can be damaging. You're far better off to recognizing, try not to be too clever, and playing the long-term game. I think is a good recipe for success for your unsophisticated investor who doesn't profess to be a professional.
Great lead in to the next question, Charlie. Just off before we recorded, I asked you the question about encouraging people who want to get going. Might want to get going in entrepreneurship, in business. You said something that really struck a chord with me, was invest in what you understand. So you just touched on amateur and professional investing. Then give us some direction. How much do we have to learn? How much can we delegate to somebody else?
Sure. The more you learn, the more you earn. That people pay more if they don't understand, and that is really a fundamental thing about investment. You pay more in fees. You typically might earn less in returns. The way to start is to recognize that there are some funds out there that will track the market and do so in a very, very cheap way. And that's not a bad thing to become sort of somewhat familiar with. Do I track the world index? Do I track the S&P 500, which is in America, or do I? But it's recognizing that a good place to start is an index fund, and a global index fund might be as an introduction, might not be a bad place to be. It doesn't cost you very much. You haven't got to worry about it. And you making a monthly commitment to those sort of funds can be good. The key to it, for my mind, is absolutely right. Invest in something you understand. Index funds are fairly straightforward to understand. They simply replicate an index. It might be the top 500 companies in America, or it might be the top 100 companies in the UK. But essentially, you get what you pay for, in as much that these are it's very you can see see through the fund, so to speak, see what the underlying holdings are. But I think the key to it comes down in invest in what you understand, and so try and get a basis of knowledge that you're not just making investments into an index tracker that you've got no idea. Have a look at the top 10 holdings. Do you recognize the names of Amazon and Tencent or Alibaba or Microsoft, whatever it may be, and be comfortable? And if not, then have a little Google and have a little feel for exactly, well, what do these companies do? And I think it's important to as I say, invest in what you understand. And for the entrepreneur, I think it's vital that again, invest in what you know. If you know a particular sector quite well, why not have a little dabble in one or two leading players in the sector that you particularly favor? It comes back to invest in what you know. And the reason why that's advantageous is because when things go wrong, and from time to time things will go wrong, if you've understood why you've invested, then you won't hopefully be the panicky investor that panics out after a 20% fall. If I buy a condominium a flat on the edge of a beach, and it might be worth, say, $250,000, and the property market crashes, and someone in 6 months later turns around to me when the market's on the floor and said, "I'll offer you £50,000 for it." For me, for the intrinsic value of that for me is worth a whole lot more than 50,000. I'm not interested. I'm not a seller. And to the point of the lesson is you want to be comfortable in the market. Will throw up all sorts of different prices at any given point in time, depending on its mood. And you want to have the foresight and understanding to say, you know what, I know what it's roughly worth. I'm not a genius, but I know I have a good idea. That's why I've invested in it. And guess what? If someone comes and offers me, Mr. Market offers me 20% of its value, I'm going to tell him to get stuffed.
The theme coming out for me is understanding, and it seems to be so often in these interviews, the notion of becoming more conscious with what you're doing. And so often I encourage people to just go home, print off their bank statements, go through and become fiercely aware of where all their money's going to start with, because they're not left with much at the end of the month, but they can't tell me exactly where it's all going. And so the direct debit idea, this almost passive management of our own money, can lead to seriously hemorrhaging money in the wrong direction. Back to that idea of those that understand the interest collect it, and those that don't understand it pay it. You have to become more conscious. There is a responsibility to become educated, and you're doing well if you have a particular affinity with something or a particular level of experience in a sector. Even if the returns aren't the most exciting thing on the planet, you'd be wise to go and find out some more and go and have a dabble there, because there's a relationship, there's an understanding, there's a knowledge that's the start of the platform to build on. Is that right, Charlie?
The industry is notorious for acronyms and trying to convey this area of complexity. But actually, you just pull away a couple of little layers of the onion, and look, well, you get what you can see it quite easily for what it is. And I think it's important that people take the time to try and don't be bowled over by words. The jargon is actually, it sounds horrendous, but actually just a couple of nights on looking at a couple of YouTube videos on how to invest, or for example, you'll learn a whole lot more in a very, very short space of time, and I believe it'll do you some good. And so I would encourage your listeners to do that. It creates a level of understanding, and that can only be a good thing in the world of investment.
You are an expert in your field. You are a man of faith, Charlie. Let's not let's refer to it as a faith in a higher power, faith in God. Whatever the listener is comfortable with, that's okay. What part does a strong faith have in building good, solid financial future?
Well, it comes down to a personal thing, and there's a number of different ways of building a personal financial future. I mean, I recognize that everyone's on a slightly different path, but for me, my faith keeps me grounded. I don't want to be a slave to money. I enjoy money for the security it brings, but do I have aspirations to go and buy Lamborghinis and yachts? I really don't. That's just me. I don't want to drive myself, work myself into oblivion. I want to be comfortable, but then certainly not sort of a slave to it. So my faith, I think, keeps me grounded on what is the most important things in life. And for me, it's not money. Money can help me achieve the things I want to achieve, the stability of the family. It can help with that. It can help me in mentally, in my mind. I don't wake up every day panicking about it. I haven't got huge debts that I'm concerned about. So I'm lucky and blessed at that. And I think it allows my priorities to shift. And when things do go wrong, and when this time last year, the market was 23rd of March, the market was at a low the pandemic crisis was at a low point from the market point of view. and people were panicking, and it was really tough. And day in, day out, we would see the market unprecedented falls. And while that's not easy, and while that is part of the cycle of investing, and one needs to be recognized that that. But what for me, what my faith did at that time and does since is to say, it's disappointing, but it's not the most important thing. And if it keeps me grounded and keeps me in the long game, then I'm not investing monies that I need right away. I am investing in the long term, and I'll just leave it where it is. And I think that's and faith can help me with that. So you can just realize that I'm not here to sort of, goals are important, but I'm not driven by short-term goals to the point where I'm a slave to them. My faith comes first.
What I've heard is you are not privy to the emotional fluctuations of the market, because you know what matters. So you can objectively as possible make an assessment at any given time and be rather binary about it, not emotional about it, because your faith keeps your feet on the ground. I don't need this stock to increase blank so I feel better and more successful this coming week, and I can tell my friends I know what matters. I know what my long-term plan is. I don't need anything outside of me to inflate my worth. I already have worth in my faith.
I think that's fair. Absolutely. I think I'm keen to stress that people should invest in not only what they understand, but that it should be sort of to some extent an extension of their character. If you are highly if you're fairly cautious, for example, and you don't wish to invest too much, my message wouldn't be go and buy a whole lot of highly volatile investments. I think that would give you you may have a hard time. So it's recognizing, setting out your expectations, being happy in your own skin, and let your investments be an extension of that. I think that makes for a happy, long-term, successful return. And those that can afford and happy to have a little, a bit bigger stomach for some volatility, and they're comfortable and knowing that the market can fall by 20% 1 year or whatever it may be, 30%, and not panic, then fine. You're made for perhaps a higher investment return over the longer term. But I think it's important that people feel comfortable in their own skin, not understand it, but also allow your investments, your style, to be somewhat of an extension of your own character.
Charlie, this is perfect. I have been in touch with Charlie ahead of time, and I've asked Charlie to put together what are the top 4 things that the wealthy do with their money. I'm actually going to call this episode, hopefully, what rich dads do and what poor dads don't. So yeah, if we're going to get some dads, me included, love a good old checklist, Charlie. So what are those top 4 things that we would really benefit from hearing from you today?
So the number one thing we've touched on a little bit, but it's not being a slave to debt. That for me is the number one. You can't play the game of investing while you've got huge credit card bills to pay. It just doesn't work. So you've got to clear those. So rich people aren't a slave to debt. Number 2, they understand the rewards for waiting. We've touched a little bit on that, but that's recognizing that there's a cost in having something now. There's an opportunity cost, but by waiting, allowing for the compounding to grow over time, and then perhaps to just have a little nibble of the investments, you can enjoy the fruits of waiting. So that's that delayed gratification. That's what I think rich people understand too. Thirdly, stay informed. Again, we've touched on it, but it's recognizing that there are lots of people out there that will bamboozle you with all sorts of perceived returns. If you understand, but the more you understand, the more you'll drill down, look at the costs, and what can you expect from these investments. When you're informed, you're making a reasonably informed choice. You haven't got to, depending on what you're trying to do with your investments, but you can start on your own. You don't have to pay professionals, and feel comfortable in in learning a little bit and learning a little bit more. Not to the point that you profess to be an expert, but enough to know, well, what is my money doing for me? Because it's far, far too much of rich people don't leave a large proportion of their wealth in cash. They allow it to work for them. It might be property, it might be stock market investments, it might be private equity, private companies. But however it is, it's working for them. Allow them your money, your hard-earned money, to work for you.
So, Charlie, can I ask you a question on number 3? Do you get people use your services who essentially want to abdicate entire responsibility of managing their fund?
They do.
What's your response to that?
Yeah. So it's funny. I have 2 different types of client. Ones that are genuinely interested in what they do and come to us because they know that they feel that we can pick funds or pick stocks better than they might, and for those people, if they're interested, I'm more than happy to talk to them. I enjoy that. I enjoy good investment conversation. But there are others that abdicate their responsibility completely on us and really, in a nice way, just say, look, that's what I'm paying you for. Not really interested in knowing. Just give me the numbers at the end of the year, or whatever it may be, and we report quarterly. But the point is that they're not that interested in what they have. That's what they pay us for. And so there's 2 very different styles. We embrace both. Not a problem. Personally, I do like talking about UK small cap companies and mid caps, but and to some extent some foreign investments too. But it's not. I fully appreciate that it's not everybody's bag, and so, but certainly, yeah, there's 2 different models there, and we happily do both.
And what I hear coming through there, you can help both candidates. We're essentially reaching out to people who want to start off and take primarily their own responsibility for it. The kind of figure value of the people that are completely abdicating it. They've already got some experience. They've already blah, blah, blah. They're just saying, I know it's going to cost me, but I don't want to deal with it. Go ahead and run with it. And
absolutely.
And that's okay too. But they've already got some experience usually.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's really important that, and even those that are abdicating responsibility, I do like to stress and write to them every year with a couple of times a year with little lessons on investing. I just feel that it's valuable, and sometimes they may be read, sometimes they may be deleted or thrown in the bin or whatever it may be. But the point is that I do feel that we as an industry have a responsibility to educate. And to what extent people are interested, that's entirely up to them, of course. But at a starting level, you absolutely need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. It would be wrong if any of your listeners were to come to myself without having or anyone without having an understanding of why would they choose a discretionary investment manager, and what are they looking to do, what are they going to gain from that. Simple understanding can go a long way, and we don't need to read huge amounts of books here. I'm not advocating for that, but an element of a simple understanding is a good thing. And as you rightly point out, Ben, it's those that have got that abdicate that responsibility do so to some extent with a position of understanding.
And in which case that abdicate transforms to delegate, doesn't it? Really, they're informed enough to delegate. Abdicate is I just don't care, I want someone else to. Delegation is I know these are the right people, so I'm wise to hand it over to them because
that's a fair point. Absolutely.
Perfect. What we got for what's number 4, Charlie?
So number 4 is really don't spend it. Don't try and compete with people. Don't enjoy life. But enjoy life in a comfortable, more secure, delayed gratification sort of way. Don't feel that you've just because you've earned X, or you've earned X from your investments. Of course, there's times to enjoy, but I think it's important that perhaps to recognize that don't look for the short-term returns just because your investments they have done particularly well one year. Right, I'll then withdraw that funds. That can also create sort of a habit of expectation that each year I'll raid the piggy bank. To my mind, set in your goal. Put those monies away on a monthly basis or whatever it may be, and in your mind lock them away. Allow at least 5-10 years worth to sort of to tick over. And of course, if a rainy day comes and the roof falls in and you need to spend those monies, you've got the security of obviously looking into those funds, taking a little bit out. But to do so on a discretionary basis, I would encourage you not to. And that's, again, I think rich people do. They've built up a nest egg so that they are seeking for passive income, money that can work for them without them doing very much. And that's what wealthy people do. And to some extent, when they leave their monies with Investec, again, that's what that provides for them, a passive income without doing very much. Investment returns through capital gain and also through income will come normally, fairly frequently, and that is, again, but that comes from waiting. It's recognizing you just can't raid your piggy bank straight away.
Charlie, you are the millionaire next door for us. I'm hearing that education is the path, and the people that have got the wonga to delegate their responsibility of it have already paid their dues, so to speak. So there's no getting away from the work, so to speak. And I love that around. You have to transform your relationship with money in that it's not to serve me. It's not here to make me feel better, in a sense. It's to be used in a smart way, in Charlie's way. Charlie, this has been a beaut. If two things here, is there anything that you would think is really important for us to hear? And secondly, can you just share how people can get in touch with you, which I can put in the bio anyway, to just wrap us up?
Sure. So my one parting message would be a little bit of graffiti that I saw on a wall in South Africa, and what was written there was, "You think education's expensive? Try ignorance." And I think that can be so apt when we're thinking about investments. So much can come from being more informed, and so that's really my would be my takeaway. I work for Investec Wealth and Investment in Cheltenham. By all means, if anyone wants to reach out to me, then that's Google that, and that'll all come up. Investec Wealth and Investment in Cheltenham. And but I would encourage you. My parting message would really be my motive for coming on, and my motive then was to support you in sharing what I believe to be an important message, and that is to take hold of your finances, take some ownership of it, understand them, let them be an extension of you, so that this doesn't become a burden and a worry, but actually they can, over time, hopefully through patience and, dare I say, faith, but less faith required if you're in for the long term, because long-term returns really have proven time and time out that actually there's a lot more one can do with cash. So let it be a friend to you, not something you fear.
Amen, buddy. Thank you, Charlie. That was brilliant.
Good.
Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, if you want to hear more from Charlie, I'll put some links in the bio. I literally want to say, Charlie, you're a saint, but you won't let me say that, so I won't. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Not at all. Great to be here.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All the best, Ben.